Hey y'all, welcome back, all my people with the common sense. If you are new here and feel like you got a little bit of common sense that's no longer so common, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. On this channel, we talk about new laws, laws that are being amended, all from the common folk perspective. Don't come for me. I don't have official law degree. I don't have any law training. I just get on good on Dr. Google and get the information and give it out to y'all, okay? And today we're talking about something that's gonna be actually part of a 3-part series, child labor regulations, and specifically those states that are looking to loosen or weaken, depending on which side you are, those regulations for child labor. But before we get any deeper, first and foremost, my name is Key, and this is What's the Key?
For me, break, for me, break the body.
Let's get right into this. As always, if you see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notes. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is the child labor provisions of the Fair Labor Standard Acts of 1983. It's the only time I'm saying that. Okay, and in this act, it pretty much protected minors from under the age of 14 from being employed, minors under the age of 18 from working in hazardous places. They restricted the type of work and the hours that could be worked by minors, and they set wage standards for people 20 and under. So that was basically the general gist of this act of 1983. And the Departments of Labor's Wage and Divisions Department is actually the department in charge of making sure that the act is enforced, okay? And they created this interagency task team. It includes education, agriculture, health and human services, justice, state, all in there to make sure there is no child labor exploitations. So, like, the biggest question is, why do these states want to loosen / weaken these laws? Okay, and on my research, y'all, and when I say I was digging deep, all right, this is mostly being pushed by conservative and business leaders, okay? And they're basically saying there's a shortage in the workforce of 2.9 million people. And in order for us to make that up, we have to allow some looser restrictions for child labor so that we can get them in the workforce and they can help. So of course, I did a little bit digging because I had questions after that. 2.9 million is missing. I looked up unemployment. There are currently 7 million on unemployment, all right? And unemployment, I looked this up, means ready to work. Because I had to make sure, like, okay, so maybe these people on unemployment though are disability. No, those are two separate things. Unemployment means they are ready to work. Okay, so you're telling me we have a shortage of 2.9 million people. There's a 7 million people ready to work. I don't think the problem is we need to push children into labor. I think we need to start paying people livable wages instead of trying to get children into labor so you can pay them lower wages. Just a thought, okay? I'm guessing that a lot of people, okay, so you're gonna have those lazy people that are on unemployment and are not trying to get off, okay? But I also think part of the workplace shortage has to do a lot with a lot of skilled people working for these businesses and corporations and not being paid what their skill is actually worth, okay? So they go off, be entrepreneurs on their own and do their own small businesses because they just make a better profit or even the same profit as they would make with a corporation. But wouldn't you rather do that by yourself than knowing that a corporation is actually getting more off of you, you know, and keeping that money while you keep the smaller profit? So I think that has a lot to do with the workforce shortage. I think the wages have a lot to do with it. You cannot expect a grown adult who has to work 40 hours a week for less than a livable wage, okay? These people, y'all tell people to work 50, 60, no, that's not reasonable, okay? That's not reasonable. You should be able to work 40 hours and make a livable wage, in my opinion, all right? But they're basically saying there's this workplace shortage and they want to use children to fill it in. I don't feel like that is the answer to this problem, okay? They can loosen or weaken the restrictions all they want, but they need a better excuse than there's a workplace shortage, okay? Because don't forget the immigrants as well that y'all trying to kick out the country. Those are able-bodied adults that we can work in this workplace shortage. So just call it what it really is. Y'all want cheaper labor, okay? And you don't want to have to pay adults higher wage. Moving on. So there are times before now, like 2023 became big when people were trying to loosen, restrict, or change the child labor regulations in any type of way. But back in 1982, during the Reagan administration, they also tried to loosen the regulations a little bit by allowing 14 and 15-year-olds to work longer hours in fast food and retails. The Demis said absolutely not. We're not having that, okay? And I can see why they said no. You got to think 1980s. the early 1900s, we had children working in mines. Children probably were just getting out of factories when they started enacting these child labor laws. So I think it was just too soon for the Reagan administration to be like, let's try to loosen. No, absolutely. I'm glad they pushed back. It's just too soon. Too soon. Okay. And then in the early 2000s, we had a homeschooling group trying to loosen the restrictions, but they didn't really get any progress going on with that. And then we had we had somebody say that child labor laws were stupid and children can be janitors. Okay, Newt Gingrich was originally supposed to be a presidential nominee. Like, he was on that. They were like, yeah, he's gonna be our presidential nominee. He said that made headlines. Republicans, like, not even we are that. Absolutely not. Okay. Obviously, he never got that presidential nominee. Okay, y'all. So this first thing we're gonna talk about pretty much said, let's see how much we could test the federal government, see if we can poke them, and if they're gonna do anything about this. Okay, good old Iowa in 2023 enacted a bill that went against a few of the federal regulations. Okay. The very first one is they allowed work-based learning programs for 16 and 17-year-olds that include hazardous jobs. So like roofing, now that they can do jobs like that in a work-based learning program. For 14 and 15-year-olds, they have extended the amount of hours they can work during the school year and during the summer. Originally, a 14 and 15-year-old had to be done at work at 7 p.m. Now it's extended to 9 p.m. Federal regulations are at 7. 14 and 15-year-olds can work up to 28 hours a week. Federal regulations are 18 hours a week while school is in session, and now Iowa has it up to 28 hours a week. They can work up till 9 p.m. on a school day while school is in session, and during the summer they can work till 11 p.m. I don't like kids working late during the school year. Get adults to close. There's no reason that a youth should be working late during the school year. So 16-year-olds can serve alcohol with 2 adults present. I don't see a problem with that. I don't really see a problem with that at all. Okay. Now 14 and 15-year-olds can do non-incidental work in the freezer and meat coolers. It's strictly prohibited. And my problem with freezers is, have y'all ever worked in a freezer and that door was little stiff, a little hard to get out of? And then just with the way that the teens in this new generation are on their phone, I just don't think it's a good idea for 14-year-olds to be in freezers doing anything, any type of work. And lastly, they allow them to work in laundries. I don't see the problem except for some of the machinery that are in laundries. I don't think I want a 14-year-old working with some of those presses and things like that, but I don't see a problem with a 14-year-old working in the laundry. So like I said, all this has been enacted by Governor Kim Reynolds, okay? And before all of this was even enacted, we had Seema Nanda, who is the Labor Department chief lawyer, and we had Jessica Lumen, who is the principal deputy administrator of the Department Division, write a letter to these lawmakers and basically say, look, if the feds say don't do it, don't do it. The lawyer wrote them a letter and said, if the feds say don't do it, don't do it. They did it anyway, as we can see in 2023. Okay, y'all, so in this next state, they no longer allow youth that are 16 and under to have to get the Department of Labor's permission to work. All right, and when they pushed this bill here in Arkansas, I love saying Arkansas, but it's Arkansas. When they pushed the Youth Hiring Act of 2023 in Arkansas, they try to push it as enhancing parental rights by allowing the Department of Labor no longer has to give the permission to work. So I give the parents permission to work. I don't really see a big problem with that too much. As long as we are still, the jobs are requiring like some type of written permission. And then during the hiring process, that age is getting verified. I don't really see the problem with not having to get the Department of Labor's permission for them to work at 14 and 15. If their parents say they can work a couple hours and they have, they have the proof of age, let them work a couple of hours. This was signed by Governor Sarah Huckabee. Y'all remember Huckabee from Governor Huckabee Sanders, and on February 7, 2023. So I don't really see anything wrong too much with what Arkansas did, because like I said, as long as they're still making sure the age is verified, parents are still giving permission, the Department of Labor don't need to give permission, But this next state, it's probably about 50-50 with what I believe, like, okay, that's cool, absolutely not, y'all on that cracked drywall, okay? Absolutely not. And this state used to be right next door to the state I'm from, good old Indiana. Okay. And on July 1st, 2024, they enacted a bill that lowered the age to serve alcohol from 19 to 18. I do not see a problem with that at all. An 18-year-old serving alcohol. And then they also allowed a 10-minute grace period for civil penalties, which basically means the violation can go on for 10 minutes without you getting in trouble or anything happening. I don't see. Listen, I was an overachiever growing up, high achiever. Okay, so at work, I was doing stuff I wasn't even supposed to be doing. And I can remember a few times at 16 where they came up to us and they was like, "You can't do that. Why? Because you're not 18." And I mean, this is as simple as me trying to throw trash in a trash compactor. You can't do that. So I'm okay with the 10-minute buy because I remember I was just throwing it and somebody stopped me. Someone said, "Absolutely not. You can't do it." In a lot of cases, a lot of the teens are just doing the work. They're not knowing they can't do it or why that's off limits for them to do if they can do it. So I don't see a problem with a 10-minute grace period at all for civil penalties. All right. So that all went into effect on July. All right. So this next set is going into effect on January 1st, 2025. Okay. So Indiana, and again, like Iowa, wants to remove the are removing the restrictions that 16 and 17-year-olds can work. I don't like that. I don't like that. I just feel like when you remove those hour restrictions, you give children in lower socioeconomic status a huge disadvantage and a higher chance of being exploited. Okay? Who's to stop that single parent who's working 50, 60 hours a week, not making ends meet, from looking at their 16-year-old who also has two younger siblings and saying, "Hey, I need you to work 40 hours a week while you're still in high school because we need the money." And then the 16-year-old's not even getting the money like that. He's just working 40 hours to pay bills. And it's not a child's responsibility to maintain the roof over their head, the food in their fridge. I remember what happened to me. My mom tried to, "You got to start giving." I never liked that. I never liked parents that did that. My dad was a little bit of the opposite. My dad said he would not ask his kids for money. It's not a child's place to be paying bills in the house. Okay? If they're working this 40 hours a week, it should be for saving for college, saving for technical school and stuff like that. Not saying they can't help their parents, but they shouldn't be forced to be working these unlimited hours. Now, what's to stop a parent from making their child work 50, 60 hours? What's to stop a child from dropping out of school when they're making 60-hour paychecks, 70-hour paychecks, and they feel like they don't need their education anymore? Are we going to make sure those jobs make sure they get a GED in the city? Is there going to be a push to make sure they at least get their high school diplomas? Like, it's just, to me, it exploits people in the lower socioeconomic status. And that's why I don't like this unlimited hours for teenagers. Because if parents that are in those lower statuses can make their children, provide some relief for them, they will. Imagine all these people that get left home. You got a 10-year-old left home with a 2-year-old. Like, they will. So I just don't like that for the kids in those those lower socioeconomic status. It's too easy to exploit them. Too easy. And then they also allow minors to work after 10 p.m. and before 6 a.m. Now, I should have dug deeper into the restriction on that because I wonder if that had to do something with homeschooling and online schooling. Because I found out doing a lot of research that homeschool were pushing for their children to be able to work overnight because they gave them school and stuff during the day and they set their schedules and things like that. I still don't think a minor should be working overnight. During your development, you don't need to have your sleep cycle disrupted like that. But it's the fact that there's no restriction on the hours anymore. That's a problem. They also repealed something that had to do with agriculture. But I'm going to have that in a separate video because I have a different view when it comes to agriculture. I don't know if it's because I'm from Illinois with the good old cornfields, but my view for agriculture is kind of different from non-agricultural places. So that'll be a separate video. They also allow you to work hazardous jobs and work-based learning courses, similar to Iowa, except they put this little good old little detail in there. This will provide immunity for civil liability that employs minors in these programs. So employers that employ minors in these work-based learning programs get immunity for civil liability. That to me just sounds like you know shit's gonna happen. Like you just know almost. Because why? I don't know, y'all. Okay, moving on to the next state. Okay. So House Bill 49 took a place on 7/1/2024. So that was just recently back in July. This is for good old Florida. Florida always concerns me. Just, you ever did that Florida man challenge where you just put Florida man in your birthday? I guarantee you find something weird. Okay. But they had House Bill 49 that went into effect on July 1st, 2024, that allows 16 and 17-year-olds now on Sundays and holidays to work more than 8 hours, even when school the next day. I don't find a problem with that. I grew up an athlete. Sundays and holidays were damn near, I mean, I still had practice, but Sundays were, I know for sure, was the only day I could work. If I could work 12 hours in that one day, I would be happy. Because it was like the only day I'm getting a check anyway. Like, I don't mind that as much. A limited hours is more longer than 8 hours because I believe the time range is still 6:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. is the latest they can work. But now they can work a 6 a.m. to a 6 p.m. or a 7 a.m. to a 7 p.m. or anything along that line. So I don't really see a problem with that too much. As long as they still have that 11 p.m. restriction, I don't see a problem with that. So also in this bill, I found this part a little weird. So they allow the superintendent and the parents to waive the 30-hour limitation that minors can work in a work week. So 16 and 17-year-olds. The superintendent can waive it based off financial hardship and things like that. I don't like that either. Limit the hour these children can work, or they will allow them to be overworked. And let's just say, what if the principal don't care about the lower socioeconomic students, the hardship students, and the dropout rates and stuff like that? He's just letting them work more hours, and I don't like it. I don't like it. If the child is having financial hardship, then help the parent. Stop trying to get the child in the workforce. Simple. So now, originally, 17-year-olds, you had to be 17 in order to work more than 6 consecutive days in a row. Now, Florida allows you to be 15 years old, which I just think it's funny to jump 2 years. 15-year-olds can now work more than 6 consecutive days in a row. I don't even like when adults do it. I don't like when adults work more than 5 days, unless it's by choice. I wonder if this is more of maybe for those 15-year-olds, maybe their parents are parenting. They're like, you can work about 2 to 3 hours and that's it. If you're working just 2 hours a day, more than 6 days in a row, I guess that wouldn't be a big of a deal. And I guess if they're putting that into place so that maybe 15s and 17-year-olds can get 15-year-olds can get a little bit more hours. If you do have that stricter parent that's like you're only working 2 or 3 hours, then I don't see that much of a problem. My problem is when it becomes not a choice. Now we got 15-year-olds working just every day, not having a day off. Rest days are important even for adult people. Get a rest day. So this is a good one that they added in there. Now 16 and 17-year-olds who work 8 hours get a 30-minute meal break for every 4 hours they work. And I realized when I was looking at the federal regulations, they don't set any meal breaks or any rest breaks for minors. So they also removed this hour restriction for students that are homeschooled or online school for 16 and 17-year-olds. My biggest thing with this is, how are we stopping people from dropping out and just not getting their education at all? Homeschooling is a little bit different. Certain online programs are a little bit different because it's more of, they give you what you got to do, you complete your work, and then you can just work your hours from there. But how do we make sure these children are still getting their education is my biggest question with all of these work hour restriction removals. Okay? So this next little thing with Florida, specifically they wrote in there that restrictions won't apply to minors employed by their parents or private domestic service. Whew. That reminds me of those, I remember I watched some shows where like their kids, like the parents own like a grocery store and the kids are working that grocery store every day. I can just see how businesses these kids are going to be. Why does it change if they're employed by their parents? Parents can be doing the same thing with getting cheap labor. I just feel like it's this thing where they think that the parents are going to make sure that the children are well taken care of. And we learned from the early 1900s and the 1800s, they don't care if they need the money and they need the help. Florida now allows the Department of Business and Professional Development to waive any of these under extenuating circumstances. So that little thing has been put in there. The Department of Business and Professional can waive any of these. And then penalties are a misdemeanor. Each day is a separate violation. So if you get a penalty the next day and the next day you still do, that's considered a whole different violation that starts, going. So I don't see a problem with that. So Florida is another one that just said, let's see what the federal government will do. Okay, so South Dakota originally had a bill that they wanted 14-year-olds to work longer hours. They wanted to be able to send their hours from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. They withdrew that bill. It is only on the table for a month, and not even a month, probably about a couple weeks. And then they withdrew that bill, okay? There's a representative in South Dakota, Representative Dusty Justin, who is yes, that is his name, Dusty Justin, who is a Republican in South Dakota. He wants the feds to revise their law so that 14 and 15-year-olds can work to 9 p.m. during the school year and 24 hours during the school week. Why? Hire adults with livable wages. Like y'all said, there's 7 million people out here looking for a job. Why are we trying to push the children in there? Trying to get 14 and 15. No, they need to be going to football games after school or being part of the debate club, chess club, sports teams, or just even going to their friends to a park just to sit and chill and do homework. Like, they don't need to be working all these hours at 14 and 15 years old. They just don't. And y'all just don't care about your state's education. Moving on. So Wisconsin had me wondering what effects does spoiled cheese have on the brain? Because at one point, Wisconsin wanted to allow 14-year-olds to serve alcohol. Why? It's because waitresses already paid lower wages, and a lot of people aren't accepting lower wages because nobody wants to tip anymore. Because in this society, we feel like we shouldn't be having to tip. You should be paying these people a livable wage. And you can pay those 14 and 15-year-olds lower. Or is it something else? Because I don't understand why you would want a 14-year-old to serve alcohol. They also wanted to let minors work longer and later hours, but Governor Tony Evers at the time in 2022 vetoed the bill in Wisconsin. So that's a little bit of what's going on in Wisconsin. Nothing too crazy, just a lot of we want, but not being pushed through. Okay, good job, Wisconsin. All right, so this next state wanted 12 and 13-year-olds to start picking up some of the workforce slack. Which y'all remember, the federal government prohibits anybody from under the age of 14 from being employed. They wanted these 12 and 13-year-olds to work for nonprofits. Okay, the state also wanted to prohibit their labor commission from being able to set any standards that exceed what the federal government put in place. Okay, and they wanted to do this because the federal government doesn't say anything about meal and rest breaks. But good old Kentucky says that minors must have meal and rest breaks. Okay, House Bill 255. The House shot it up. The Senate said absolutely not. Why do you think we're going to employ 12 and 13-year-olds? You're just asking for lawsuits. Not only employ 12 and 13-year-olds around these grown people, but then you want the Labor Commission to not have any? Yeah, goodbye. That bill dead. I still think it's wild to want to take away rest and meal breaks. You want people working for you 8 hours a day, but don't want them to rest, use the bathroom, do shit. Ridiculous. I'm going to speed through these next few states because they had little minor things that are going on. Georgia introduced a bill and then withdrew it in motion. They wanted to eliminate work permits. Like I said, I don't see a problem with eliminating work permits. They did withdraw it, so I wonder what kind of centers they had set after that probably didn't go. But I don't get the work permit thing as being a problem as long as we have parental consent. Missouri and West Virginia are working to remove their work permits. Like I said, as long as something's in place afterwards to make sure we're verifying age and parents are still giving consent, I don't see the problem with eliminating work permits. New Jersey wants to extend the working hours of minors during the school year in the summer. They'd have to go deeper into that. But just to note, New Jersey is like the only non-Republican state that's pushing to loosen / weaken child labor laws. So I thought that was quite interesting. They must have a lot of business leaders up in New Jersey because they're the only non-Republican state not pushing. Okay, so now that we kind of talked about all the states that are looking to loosen the laws and things like that, I think it's important that we get into some of these violations. Okay, so like I said, that act came out in 1983. 1980s was people were like, let's see if you stand 10 toes down. Okay, they were violating left and right, and they definitely stood their 10 toes down and they brought them violations down. Okay, speed up. In 2020, they had 3,400 cases of child labor violations. Okay, that decreased significantly in 2021 to 2,800. Okay, and I think that had a lot to do with, one, companies were laying off. And who you gonna lay off first? The people that can get sick easiest, the children. Two, parents were like, my child's not working there. And then three, those ones that were like, yeah, you already not supposed to be working here. Last thing I need you to do is to catch COVID in the company's name, and then got rid of all their child labor violations that they were doing. But back in 2022, it did increase again to 3,900. So that way over 2020 where it was 3,400. And now in 2023, there were 5,800 cases of child labor violations. Okay, Department of Labor the Wage Division, they investigated 955 cases, and out of those cases, there were about 8 million in fines. Originally, I was thinking that's not enough, but I had to think of just like maybe minor violations that may be going on, like maybe that kid worked over 30 minutes, maybe they blah blah blah, etc. But 8 million is it's but a lot of states, when we'll get into that in the second video, are trying to increase those penalties, so we will see over time. All right, some of the most frequent violations that they have are the youth working longer than they're allowed, they're working in hazardous jobs, they're working with vertical batter mixers, like that they use for bakery and meat processors. They're driving a motor vehicle or a forklift, and that's not allowed unless you're 17 years old. They have a lot of restrictions on that even when you start driving at 17, okay? I think it's important to know, and I wonder if some of these states truly realize this. When it comes between the federal and state law for child labor regulations, if anybody sues or any cases, the safer law will always win. So if a parent gets upset about what happened in something and they go because, they eliminated work permits or they don't ask for permission and their child didn't work this hazardous job, if they sue, the safer law will win, which is most likely whatever the federal government put in place. Just putting that out there. So that brings us to the end of the video. I hope y'all liked it. We talked about them states looking to loosen or weaken. Some of them people who want to use our children to replace paying livable wages to adults. And yeah, those are some of my opinions on it. So if any of you got some common sense opinions that y'all want to put down in the comments, what do you think the key is for the labor shortage? What do you think the key is on these child labor regulations? Should we loosen them? Should we restrict them? What's the key? Let me know. All right. Bye.
For me, break, for me, break the body for me.